Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Ruthless Aggression Era podcast. I'm Metal Matt, and joining me tonight is
Everybody, this is Adam Rice. Once again, all across your airwaves, once again, to talk about this thing we call professional wrestling, ruthless aggression style.
Yep, Adam is joining me once again. You've heard him on Shooting the Breeze. He was even on the infamous 5.5 hour long podcast last Saturday. So, yeah.
Way to have a stopwatch going, Matt.
Yeah, the 2.5 hour podcast turned into 5.5 hours. So, yeah, I'm not that good with time, but yeah,
it's okay. It's okay.
But this week we're going to be talking about Tough Enough 3. But before we go any further with that, we need to talk about something, that's affected the entire wrestling world. The tragic, sudden passing of Bruno Sammartino, old school wrestler, was the WWF champion for years and years, absolute legend in the business. It's possible that professional wrestling wouldn't be what it is today without Bruno, and he was past my time, honestly. I think by the time I started watching wrestling, he had long since retired. But I'm watching some of his matches on the network, like his steel cage match with Ivan Koloff, and very, very good, So yeah, rest in peace, Bruno. Anything you got to say about Bruno, Adam?
Wrestling fans today don't understand truly how over Bruno was. The man was WWF champion. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, 3 W's before you get to that F. He was Worldwide Wrestling Federation champion for only twice, but for a combined 11 years. And the reason why is the man was so white hot in the Northeast. Bruno was a Vince Sr. guy who Bruno appealed to the Italian Americans in New York, and that's why Vince wanted him. It was all part of that for good or for bad, racial booking, ethnic booking that Vince Sr. liked. He wanted Bruno for the Italians. He wanted Pedro Morales for the Puerto Ricans and the Hispanics. He wanted, when he put the belt on Bob Backlund, it was so he could have an All-American boy. It's why he had Ivan Putski up there for all the Poles and the Eastern Europeans. It's the reason why Hulk Hogan had his name was because Vince wanted someone to appeal to the Irish and the Scots. Even though those are two totally different sets of people, it's what Vince Sr. thought would work in his very ethnic, in the big ethnic centers in the Northeast. Bruno had to go from New York to Boston to Philly to Pittsburgh and Albany, and these were, especially those major cities, large Italian American populations, and that's what kept Bruno over, because he was one of them. He may not have looked like a normal guy. I mean, Bruno had the big barrel chest, and he was, not very tall, but big, but he related to him because he was their guy. And that's why he stayed over for so long. Bruno held that championship, the first round, for almost a solid 8 years. And the only reason he dropped it was because he got tired of it. Bruno Sammartino didn't drop that belt because there was a better heel come along or a new babyface. Bruno dropped the belt because he just was like, enough. He gave it up. No one, very few guys who are that over to that level you'd ever hear about doing that. And I did the same thing you did, Matt. I went and looked back at some of his matches. Just today, I watched him wrestle a main event match for the title in 1975 in Madison Square Garden. Let me go to the Garden here in a second. But it was Bruno versus Ernie Ladd for the championship. And Ernie, 6'9", 330 pounds, and he covered the ground he walks on. Come sit down here under the learning tree. Ernie Ladd, this big man, he dwarfed Bruno, but they worked so well together because Bruno was so strong. You could buy Bruno throwing Ernie around. It was just. But let me talk about the Garden real quick before we get off Bruno. Madison Square Garden is the McMahon's backyard. Bruno sold that building out at least 80 times. At least. There are very few professional wrestlers who become so ingrained. You understand wrestlers becoming ingrained with the territories because that's where they work a lot and they that's where they become famous. Like Flair in the Carolinas, or Lawler in Memphis, and Vern and Nick Bockwinkel up in the AWA in Minnesota. But Bruno transcended that, not just being the face of a territory. Bruno is connected with the most prestigious arena in the world. Madison Square Garden. I mean, that's Main Street for everybody. That's the biggest stage you can play because of the history. And Bruno was connected to that building like very few other wrestlers become connected to an arena. You think about Flair in the Greensboro Coliseum and Lawler in Mid-South Coliseum and, the Von Erichs down at the Sportatorium in Dallas. But it just meant that much more for Bruno and to be over like that. He died at 82 years old, so he lived a full life. You always hate to lose someone suddenly. But, Bruno, I don't think Bruno would be the kind of guy who said he had any regrets or that he wanted an extra day. He ran his race, was a good man throughout. And, the professional wrestling world is a little bit less classy today without Bruno in it.
Yeah, I mean, just one final thing before we move on, because I was watching the first couple of WrestleManias for the nightly, and obviously WrestleMania 1 took place in Madison Square Garden. And Bruno's son David was competing. I think it was against Bruce Beefcake. He wasn't the barber yet, and I believe he had Jimmy Valiant as his manager, or was it Johnny Valiant?
In New York at that time, it would probably be Johnny.
Yeah,
because I know Jimmy was still working, probably down in the Carolinas at that point, or maybe even Memphis.
Yeah, Johnny Valiant, who we also lost recently. But yeah, Bruno. David got a good reaction, but Bruno got a very good reaction. Like probably, maybe one of the loudest pops of the night.
It's just Bruno. That's what he meant to that area. And I mean, you can try to compare. It's just such a different thing, because people will go, "What about Hogan? Or what about Austin? What about Flair?" And those pops. It was different for Bruno, and you could tell it was different. Hogan had the luxury of having the kids in the audience, and so did Flair and Austin and Rock. Bruno's reaction from the audience feels visceral. It's more than that's my guy. He represents me and everything I want to be and stand for. And it was from grown adults, because it was explained the other night on Two Guys, One Sport by our good friend Taku's Minion. The Garden didn't let kids back in those days because they didn't want the liability problems in case of a riot broke out. So it was grown adults reacting to this guy, not because they were being told to, it was because he represented them in the best sense of the term. And I think that's why he was so white hot. Because they see him and the American dream, and he was living it. He was attaining it. And even if they weren't having the best of luck here in the United States as first or second generation immigrants, their guy was. He was making it happen. And I think that meant something to them that it's hard to quantify.
Yeah, well said, man. I think final thoughts on Bruno, guy that legend in wrestling, professional wrestling probably wouldn't be what it is today without Bruno Sammartino. So rest in peace, Bruno.
Yeah, Hulkamania doesn't get a chance to get off the ground if Bruno didn't already lay the foundation before him. So, Bruno will never be forgotten. It's hard to forget a guy who just means that much to the company, to wrestling. And, like I said, he's 82 years old. He ran his race, and he ran it in the best way possible. And that's what more can you ask for? Rest in peace, Bruno, and see you on the other side.
So this week's topic will be on Tough Enough 3. And the whole Tough Enough show was WWE's real first foray into reality television. And Adam, did you watch any of the Tough Enoughs back in its first run?
I remember being very excited by the premise of Tough Enough when they first announced it before the very first season. The idea of regular fans competing for that ultimate dream to be a then WWF/E superstar. So I remember being very intrigued. I remember watching a lot of the first season, and a lot of that, seeing what it really took, and it really was one of the very first backstage looks at the company. And I remember watching a little bit of season 2, and I think season 3 is about when I fell out because the ratings started dipping. I kind of got lost interest because that reality TV aspect of it took over a little bit. So I think I kind of tuned out on it. And of course, as the times went on, eventually networks stopped caring about this wrestling reality show.
Yeah, this is really like the first foray into reality television, and it still continues on to this day with Total Divas and Total Bellas, which, I'll be honest, I am not a fan of reality television at all. I do not like it at all. I tried to watch Total Divas. I couldn't last 30 seconds. I thought it sucked. So I don't know. Like,
I don't consider myself a reality TV guy either. I'm of the Real World Road Rules, very early generation. I remember that being on TV. Never really watched it because, honestly, it was outside of my demographic. I was a kid then. But I watched Idol, like a lot of people did, and then like other sports, reality TV was hit or miss for me. This was right up my alley because professional wrestling. I think that's what drew a lot of people in, and it really was one of those very early chances at reality TV that initially worked. It just kind of faded.
Yeah, I tried to watch Total Divas. I just could not do it. Just could not do it. I absolutely do not like reality television, and
Well,
just to put it nicely.
it's. I think you have to separate competition reality shows and then those invasive behind the scenes reality shows.
Right.
Shows like American Idol, The Voice, um, those very competition based ones, I tend to enjoy more because it's they're doing something. Like I
Mm-hmm.
like music, and so when I see an Idol or The Voice or X Factor when it was on Nashville Star, for those who remember that, those are the kind of things that I liked out of my reality TV. Um, Outside of I really didn't get into Survivor or Big Brother because those kind of fell on the other side more so because it was just let's put a camera on these people and see if they do something stupid. And more often than not, they do something stupid. And it continues today with stuff like the Real Housewives and Love and Hip Hop and Real Basketball Wives. And it's on and on. So something like Total Divas is fine. I mean, it's not hurting my feelings being on the air. It's just that's not Nikki Bella. That's what the producers want you to think Nikki Bella's like. That's not Carmella. What the producers want you to think Carmella's like. That's not Naya. So it just unless you're really capturing something that's happening, unfolding before your eyes, reality TV really doesn't do anything for me. Like when we saw Paige start to lose her mind on those shows, it was because it was actually happening in real life. So it was actually documenting something. You can't say that for the other stuff.
Yeah, like I have watched a couple of reality shows. I watched Gene Simmons' Family Jewels back in the day. I also watched this reality show called Supergroup, which was like this entire like various band members formed a supergroup like Ted Nugent, Sky Yin from
Wasn't
Anthrax.
that wasn't that the one that had ended up having Vince Neil as the lead singer?
No, it was Sebastian Bach.
Sebastian Bach.
Yeah, it was Ted Nugent, Sky Yin from Anthrax, Sebastian Bach from Skid Row, Jason Bonham, John Bonham's son from Led Zeppelin, and Evan Seinfeld from Biohazard, and they all formed this supergroup. And I do remember liking that one. I haven't watched it in years though, so I don't know how well it's aged, but
I remember. I think I vaguely remember something like that taking place, and I was like, "Okay, this is cool." For some middle-aged dudes trying to reclaim some glory. Okay, although I shouldn't say that about David Bonham. He's got a good gig. I think he's still when they get together, he still plays with Zeppelin, but I could be wrong.
yeah, I think so because I know that he played at the reunion show back in 2007.
Yeah, I think he played with someone else before that, but I don't remember. But that's another good one there. We could go on for hours about music.
Yeah, yeah, but yeah, like you said, there are certain type of reality shows that I think are better than others. Like I wasn't sure what to expect from Tough Enough 3 because I had never really watched Tough Enough before. Like the
So you
only
didn't
Tough
see the previous two seasons?
I didn't see Tough Enough 1 or 2 before this. I did see the season with Stone Cold on it. That's the
When
only
they brought it back?
yeah. Like when they brought it back in 2011, that's the only season I watched. I tried to watch the most recent one that had Mandy Rose on it. I couldn't do it. I don't know. It was just too different for me. I don't know. I didn't like the format that they were doing there.
The format you saw from those and what I'm sure you noticed when watching on Tough Enough 3 were they're almost two totally different shows.
Yeah.
The recent ones were a bit more polished and made for TV friendly. The early ones were had that very raw and uncut. Hate to be very TV buzzword, but they looked like the way you thought they'd look. The newer ones they didn't do it for me either.
Yeah, so I didn't know what to expect from Tough Enough 3. I didn't really watch most of the seasons. Um but we will go down there episode by episode and we'll see, what we got. And I guess we can go and start with episode 1 of season 3. Are you tough enough? And so basically how it is that people send in videotapes to them and they all gather in, I think, California. I think they auditioned several different areas, but I think it was mainly California. And there's like a bunch of people, 75, then down to 25, and that's the final 13. And
Yep.
did you watch this episode first run?
I'll be honest, I didn't do a review leading up to this, so a lot of this will be fuzzy for me. But
That's fine.
I do remember, the build to Tough Enough 3. I know they tried to do change a little bit here or there. You still have the trainers.
Mm-hmm.
I think this was Tough Enough 3 was the first year for Bill DeMott as a trainer.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, the trainers for this were Al Snow, who was the trainer on the first couple of seasons, Ivory, and Mr. Jelly Donuts himself, Bill DeMott.
Yep, and I think it was nice that they cut back on the trainers. That way, you could kind of get a little bit focus more on because the season before they had like 5, and one of them was Bob Holly, which for everyone who didn't really, I think Tough Enough 2 was the year Bob Holly damn near beat the shit out of a kid.
It's this season actually. Yeah, it's
is it this season?
Yeah, Hardcore Holly was a trainer on the second season. Here he's only appears in one episode, but is the episode where Holly stiffs Matt Capitelli, and we'll get to that when we get to it. But yeah, this is the season where that happens.
Yeah, they cut back on the trainers, and I think that was a good idea. Al Snow being the head guy, and Bill DeMott being the guy who would be the trainer for them for a good long while up until as everyone knows, a few years ago. And I'm pretty sure, this is one of the last. I don't know how much longer Ivory was around after this.
I think she was around for a few more years after this because this is around 2002, 2003. I think she had more or less kind of retired from the ring because she was more or less a personality on WTV. Because I do remember her and Todd Grisham hosting this WWE recap show called the WWE Experience. So by this point, she had basically become more or less a personality on TV rather than a wrestler.
Right. Yeah, I don't rightly remember, but those were the trainers. And the first episode kind of introduced us into our 13, and they were, as I have them listed here, Chad, with no last name, Eric Markovsky, Sorry, I'm butchering his name. If he's listening, I apologize. Jamie Burke, Jill, John Hennigan, and for those of you who are listening, yes, that is a familiar name. Jonah Edelman, Justin, Matt, could you give me 1 second? I have to mute this.
Sure. But yeah, there were actually some interesting competitors on this season alone.
I'm back, guys. I apologize.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there were Jonah Edelman, Justin Kelly, Lisa, Matt Capitelli, another familiar name, Nick, Rebecca, and Scott were your contestants. But there were some interesting other names attached to this season who you didn't see as contestants on screen.
Yeah, like there were a few familiar faces that didn't quite make the final contestants, but they did make either the final 75 or the final 25.
And should we probably the most famous who didn't make it? I dive right in would be one Melina Perez.
Indeed, I think
she's probably the most famous who didn't make it. For those who don't remember or have tried to forget, Melina of Eminem fame was a part of this season, and this is where she met John Hennigan, who would later become take your pick, Johnny Nitro, Johnny Mundo, Johnny Impact. I don't. Is he going by something else these days?
I think at the moment he's going by Johnny Impact because he's in Impact at the moment.
And for those who don't remember Melina's time in the company, she did become a 3-time WWE Women's Champion. She's technically, even though she didn't make the cut on Tough Enough, she's the most successful female to ever try out for the competition as far as career goes. And there's also those other things she became known for that I won't go into just yet. But she didn't make the cut. And neither did Sean Davari, who would later become known. I think that's Khosrow Davari when he was managing Muhammad Hassan. And he would also wrestle under his real name. And Daniel Puder was on this episode, but it was tried out for the season, but he'd become much more famous the next year.
Yeah.
Don't shoot on Kurt Angle, kids. But we'll get into this first episode. Matt, what were your impressions of this new cast of characters?
I think it was pretty interesting. One thing I did notice that I was actually kind of surprised by the fact that out of all of them, John did not seem to have a lot of charisma. Like, I don't know, he just seems really bland.
Which was a criticism of him, I would say, very early on. He was a bit of a him. For those who remember those early Eminem years on SmackDown, Mercury and Nitro weren't this charismatic team. They were good-looking guys who were athletic, and rubbed you in the wrong way enough that they were decent heels. But a lot of their heel stuff came from Melina being just a total bitch. and that's what made them work. But they didn't have a great. They were kind of charisma vacuums. They kind of sucked everything up, and it was just like ugh. Sometimes, but they were great athletes. But you're right. Very early on, he didn't. He was very quiet and kind of to himself.
Yeah, so one notable thing about this episode, one of the people who was part of the final 25 but didn't make it, and they focused on him a lot. A guy named Wendell, who tried out, just got completely gassed out, and Al Snow just up and cuts him like right away. And throughout the episode, like Al Snow is being pretty harsh on Wendell, but the reason he is because he sees potential. Like he thinks he's going to be a star, and it just never happened.
If you're going to go be a professional wrestler, kids, and one friend of the show, Duke, will tell you this as he's on this journey now. If you're going to go into that ring and you don't have your cardio up, you might as well walk out the door.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard. It is hard. It's not something I could do.
Me neither.
Al Snow would chuck me out the, and I deserve it because you see those guys, running the ropes, up downs, flat back bumps, trying to, and the whole goal is to gas these kids. And the Wendell fell right into that. It's just a part of the. It's just a part of. When it comes to the reality part of this whole presentation, that is very real. If your cardio is in shape, I don't care how big you are or how pretty you are. If your cardio in with it, you got to go.
Yeah, so they get down to the final 13, and who should show up to talk to these kids but JR, Jim Ross, and Kevin Dunn.
Dun, 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 dun. Lucky Beaver motherfucker.
But Kevin Dunn, I don't think even says a word in this episode. It's mostly just JR talking. And JR at the time was I believe the executive vice president of talent relations.
Yes, at this point in time, JR is still executive vice president of talent relations. So he's the guy they'd be dealing with. This is one of their direct bosses telling them what they need to do. I'm not shocked Kevin Dunn didn't say anything because Kevin Dunn doesn't want to be seen or heard. He just wants his fingers all over the product. I will go off on a tangent if I don't shut up now. But yes, but this is JR stepping out in front and telling these kids what he expects as not only as their boss, but as a 30-year guy in the business. Well, at that point in time, it was more like 20. Well, no. It'd be 30 around this time. But he had been with the WWE at that point for 10 plus years. And so he's giving them the lay of the land, shape up, ship out.
Yeah, so everybody tries some bumps, some front bumps, and one contestant in the final 25, Vala, like nearly breaks her neck. Like she lands right on the back of her head, and it's a scary moment to watch. And I actually thought it was a Chris Benoit Sabu ECW situation because I thought she broke her neck right then and there.
I'm remembering that as you're talking about it. Didn't she go to do a front bump?
Yeah.
And like a roll through, and she just came right down on the back of her head?
Yeah.
Yeah, that. It's a part of learning.
Indeed.
I mean, I bet you she had a concussion.
Maybe it would not surprise me if she did.
And that's all a part of you. You learn. That's how they were. Those guys were taught. And what I mean by that is, you're going to learn this, or you're going to hurt yourself. There's no in between. And not only that, even if you do learn it, you're still going to hurt yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And here we have this girl tried to do her best, but you land on your neck once. I promise you won't do it again. And if you do it again, you may not get a second chance.
Yeah. So the final
that's how they learned. Sorry,
yeah.
Matt, go right ahead.
No, it's okay. I was just going to say that I think people do say that even when you're training to wrestle, odds are you'll get at least one concussion.
I remember hearing a story, and this is a very old school story, but it relates to this. Is that when Nick Bockwinkel was training, yes, all those many moons ago, his dad was a wrestler, and it came time for Nick to be trained. And so they were getting ready to train, and Nick's dad picked him up for a body slam. No training on how to take a bump or anything like that. Just Nick's dad picked him up in a body slam, threw him down. Nick landed directly on his back without his feet coming down first, because that's how you're supposed to do it. You want your feet to come down so they would take some of the absorption of the mat and the bump. And when as soon as his back hit the canvas, the mat, because I'm sure they didn't even have a ring. I'm sure it was just a mat. His dad threw him down. And when his back hit, all the air out of his body just left. And he's laying there gasping for air. And his dad leans over and says, "When you catch your breath, we'll do it again. Next time, land on your feet." And that was a part of the learning process. I'm going to throw you down, and you're going to either get it right or you're going to be laying there.
Yeah. So the final challenge is mountain bikes. They have to ride mountain bikes up a hill. Like this was an extremely goofy movie or something.
Sure. Yeah, I know. Hey, it's once again cardio. It's all about getting that cardio going. Is what that whole challenge was about.
Yeah.
Who won that first challenge?
I don't know. I don't remember who won it. I think even someone said I can't remember if it was like John Gabruick or Bill DeMott. He's like, I don't care who wins, just make it to the end. So I don't remember who won.
No winner.
I don't know if there was any winner.
Okay.
So yeah, it goes down to the final 13, and they go to their new mansion home, which looks awesome.
Oh yeah, that MTV style.
Yeah.
Giant mansion with a pool and yeah, the hallmark of all early 2000s reality TV shows, the giant house that everyone stays in.
Yep.
I'm sorry for being cynical.
No, that's fine. That's fine. So we move on to episode 2. This is not a game show.
Well, did anyone get eliminated in episode 1? Outside of
not in episode 1, I don't think. I think it just was the final 25, and it boils down to the final 13.
Okay.
So we go to episode 2. This is not a game show, and Scott already has nuclear heat in the house. Everybody does not like him, mainly because I think when the contestant says that he doesn't know when the right time is to speak. And he ends up screwing up a bump, and Bill DeMott gets right in his face and he yells at him, and Scott says that DeMott makes him uncomfortable. which is kind of weird to think considering what came out about Demott and his training
Yeah,
style
yeah,
at
Scott,
NXT.
Scott Bodemont. You're not the only one Bodemont made uncomfortable. Trust me. But that's Bodemont's style. He's gonna get right up in your face and call you every name. It's just the whole other stuff that went over the line.
Yeah.
But like I said, that was definitely a foreshadowing moment if there ever was one.
Yeah. So, let's see. Jill ends up leaving the competition. She ends up quitting due to tension with Jonah, and this was made apparent in the first episode because apparently Jonah ended up cheating on his girlfriend with Jill, and so there's a lot of tension between those two in the house.
The less said about that, the better. All I'm going to say though is that is so MTV that it hurts my soul. But once again, that is in a weird way another snapshot of the professional wrestling world. You know, when you're on the road and you're sharing this environment with men, these guys and girls being on the road together, that stuff happened. So even though in the reality TV sense you want to roll your eyes about it, in the real world aspect of it, it fit right into the puzzle.
Yeah, and it's weird because like the way the episode kind of spins it, it doesn't really, it isn't really made clear that that's the reason she leaves. Like it's pretty much all but confirmed, really. But I think it's pretty obvious that's the reason she leaves. But the way the show kind of spins it, that she just up and quits just for no reason.
It's reality TV, baby. That's how they do it.
Yeah. So then we move on to episode 3. Jonah makes impression, and Scott continues to have heat. And the reason is the very first word that comes out of his mouth in this episode is a homophobic slur.
What more can you say?
Yeah.
I know it was the early 2000s, and that might seem like a lifetime ago. Hell, it's been 15, 16 years for those of us who can't believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And we weren't as enlightened. I don't want to say enlightened, but we've come to understand that those are some things you don't say.
Yeah.
And this guy, and then it's very macho, very, to say that word. I'm sure it's the word I'm thinking of. And of course you're going to have heat, stupid. You shouldn't be saying that shit in the first place. You notice how some of these people didn't have. You notice how none of them, these early ones, didn't really decide to pursue pro wrestling for much longer after this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like a majority of them didn't.
And I'm happy that a guy like Scott, who feels the need to use that word, didn't get into the business because it's better off without him in it.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't this? No, this is episode 3, right?
Yeah, episode 3.
This is the Crazy Girl episode, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so Matt and Jonah make a bet because Al Snow does talk about, bets in this. So they make a bet. If Matt Capitelli wins the mile, Jonah has to do an impression of the Mott. If Jonah wins, Matt has to shave his head, and Matt ends up winning. So Jonah has to do his impression of Bill DeMott, and it's honestly kind of funny, just like stroking his beard, in the corner. got getting in people's faces, and as he's doing this, the mod is just staring a hole right through him.
It's funny that a guy with the name who wrestled under the name Hugh Morris didn't have a sense of humor.
Yeah.
And as I said, this is and I don't mean to make light of it, but I called this the Crazy Girl episode
Hmm.
because that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, it is what happened, it is it's sort of a big part of the episode because Lisa ends up struggling in the ring, stays home while everybody else goes out, and Lisa is gone when they get back. And John Gruberich comes by the house and says that Lisa chose to leave because wrestling wasn't the right choice for her. He claims, but the reality of it is that she lost her mind. Pro Wrestling Torch reported that she was removed from the show after what was being referred to as a psychotic breakdown. Apparently she was throwing herself at the walls. She broke into the control room. She went up on the roof and threatened to jump off. And she ended up getting committed to a facility, like an asylum. Her parents came in. She tried to attack them. She claimed that she did not know who they were, so she really did have a breakdown. And what's even you know what's even more surreal about is that later on, after this all happened, she was able to talk her way, backstage, for OVW and all that. She even apparently had a face-to-face conversation with Vince McMahon himself. Um, he was even allowed to help out with the pyrotechnics, which but yeah, Lisa really did apparently just lose her mind during the making of this episode.
And I want people to understand one of the very scary parts of this is um, she escaped. She was placed into custody um, at LAX, and she escaped, shutting down a wing of the hospital, wing of the airport. Excuse me. Need I remind everyone, this is still roughly a year out of 9/11.
Yeah.
So this was a crazy person. Sorry, but let's just say what it is. This is someone who suffered a psychotic break, escaping from police, not knowing if she's a threat to herself, at an airport. Just a year shy of 9/11, and they'd had to shut down a whole wing of LAX because of this girl. Like Matt said, she managed to talk her way into OVW, into backstage at a show, and they let her near the pyrotechnics at a TV taping. She got up to talk to Vince. Holy shit. I mean, that is a level, and it kind of speaks to where were people taking her seriously? Were they not? She It's just one of those things that it could. We're lucky it didn't get worse, because finally someone took her picture, took it to security, and said, "Don't let this woman near here," which finally ended everything. But yeah, this was a weird one, ladies and gentlemen. I hope she's healthy and fine now, and has gone on to live a happy life and has got help with her issues. But this was a weird one.
Yeah, same here. I hope she got the help that she needed. And so the episode ends when Scott ends up tearing a ligament in his hand while playing volleyball.
You hear about injuries like that all the time, and like in the baseball off season, in the off season for any weird freak injury, put someone out for a long period of time. It's just, if you're trying out for any sport or you're in any contact sport or high level athletics, don't do anything. Just stay in your lane. The less chance you get hurt, the more chance you have to be able to play. But it is what it is.
Yep. And so we move on to episode 4, the meat of competition. And so hip tosses are being learned, and training is starting to get a bit more intense. Jonah ends up winning the meat eating competition and vomits right afterwards. We get to see all of it.
Reality TV, baby.
Yeah. And Scott ends up, drinking the night away and ends up getting alcohol poison. I think they never really they never outright say what happens, but I think it's sort of implied that it's like some kind of like alcohol poison or something like that because they have to pump his stomach and all that stuff.
Don't try to drink like Ric Flair if you can't hang.
Yep. So and Scott, it just gets even worse for Scott because John ends up accidentally knocking out Scott for a little bit.
When you see these kind of things happen, and you wonder how much is for reality TV and how much of it is real, but what you're seeing is just another example of something you would deal with on the road. That one guy who just won't stop. And we all deal with that guy. We deal with him in the office, at work, at school, at home, maybe. Just that one person who you're around who consistently just doesn't know when to stop talking, doesn't know when to quit, or puts themselves in positions that they shouldn't be in, and then disaster tends to follow. And so, on one hand, you want to maybe feel for Scott, but you also want to be like, you know what, dude, you're kind of a prick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so Jonah accidentally lands on Demot's head. A lot of injuries in this episode.
How did Jonah not die immediately on the spot? Because I'm pretty sure that would have been grounds for Bill DeMott to rip his throat out.
Yeah.
But, hey, and look, like I said, injuries happen.
Oh, yeah.
Just a part of training.
And so the episode ends with Chad getting cut because despite his size, he doesn't have no charisma.
Again, not all to say about that. Charisma is a part of the package, and you better be really good at something else if you don't have the charisma. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You better look a certain way, or be able to talk, or you better be able to work your ass off in the ring. But if you don't have charisma, especially in those days in WWE, when work rate really wasn't that high placed, you better have a good look, or you better be able to draw people in another way. And if you can't, they have no use for you.
Yeah, and so we move on to episode 5, Fight for Your Dreams. And Jamie makes a habit of burping around the house and then says that she's going to be a diva afterwards. And this ends up becoming a running gag.
You can tell at this point they're struggling for footage.
Yeah.
Like, who cares?
Mm-hmm.
She burps. Do people expect divas not to burp? I don't understand. Whatever. Okay, MTV.
Yeah, and Rebecca is forced to leave because her mom is getting foreclosed, and like mentally she can't. Her mind's not where it needs to be, and she leaves to go and be with her mom.
Yeah. Yep, it's unfortunate to have your dream cut, because it's something you can't control, but keeping a house over your family member's head is more important than putting on sparkly spandex 300 days out of the year.
Indeed, indeed. And so Tommy Dreamer comes by to talk and talks about, all the injuries that he
ECW.
suffered.
ECW. Sorry, you said Tommy Dreamer. It was a natural
Yeah,
reaction. I apologize.
that's fine. So he comes by and he talks about all his injuries that he suffers, and he tells a story about how like he was sort of unemployed after ECW went under, but his dad ends up suffering from Parkinson's disease, and he was going blind. But before he went blind, he was able to see Tommy Dreamer compete, I believe, against RVD. So his dad got to see his dream come true. And so, Tommy Dreamer, it's not just a name. That was his dream to be a wrestler. And Tommy Dreamer has like all this passion for the business, and it really shows.
There is no better story in professional wrestling than Tommy Dreamer. And like the guy basically to this day walks around put together by super glue, couple paper clips, and a whole lot of tape. Because he loved this business so much, he put himself through barbed wire and tables and tacks and fire. And he had Jerry Lawler rupture a testicle with a kendo stick. Because those are the kind of things Tommy gave up for the business. And he's a Hall of Fame guy who probably would never be in the Hall of Fame. Because he's just one of those glue guys who make the locker room better, who make the television product better. He's running his House of Hardcore promotion today and having some success with it, and God bless him. Tommy is just one of those good guys. Met his wife in the business. Has been with her ever since. Lives and breathes. We'll come to your show if you give him a call. Granted, he should probably never wrestle again, but he's just one of the good guys. And I know this is about Tough Enough, but when you focus on Tommy Dreamer in an episode like that, you got to stop and give respect to the guy. If there was anybody who epitomized what a fan. He just was that. His presence was what it was. He was never going to be a world champion on the high level. But he was just, people connected with him. And he's just one of the good ones.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, when you mentioned him rattling off his injuries, I'm sure that took half the episode.
Yeah, there were a bunch of injuries that he was listing.
What was our challenge for this episode?
I don't know if there was a challenge for this episode. I could be wrong. I do know that they do work on their aerial stuff, and John ends up bragging about high flying.
Shocker. Starship Pain himself. I know that's not what he calls it these days, but
yeah, it's our Starship Pain, or the end of the world in Lucha Underground.
Yeah. Again, high flying is just another one of those things, and it was so it's popular today. It was popular then, and if you can do it and be really good at it, you can have a career in the business. Just look at Jeff Hardy and Rey Mysterio.
And speaking of Rey Mysterio, he's the one that comes and visits in this episode.
Again, Rey is awesome.
Yep.
What more can you say about Mr. 619?
Yeah, and one thing I did like about this is that Rey Mysterio, and this was back when Rey had just put the mask back on, to go to WWE, but he ends up taking it off in front of all the contestants, and we never quite see his face, but he does take it off for all the contestants, and
I
you know,
remember that. I remember that actually being in the promo for the episode. The
mhm.
whole Ray taking off his mask. And I always thought to myself then, because I watched WCW. I'm like, didn't he have it off there towards the end? Like, I don't understand. But then again, I remembered I really couldn't remember what he looked like.
Yeah.
So it did have that aura. But yeah, that Ray, like I said, what more can you say? He's one of the best. And
So
I'm sure those kids got a thrill seeing, Ray without his mask for whatever that was worth.
yeah, I think even one of the trainers, I can't remember who it was. I don't know if it was John Gruber or Bill DeMont or whatever, but I think one of them does say, like I can't remember what it is, but it's like you should consider it an honor that Rey Mysterio took off his mask for you.
After he had to fight to get his mask back.
Yeah.
Because he had to fight um, the Mexican, the regulatory authorities in Mexico. Because for those who don't know, I'm sure as many of you are aware that Lucha Libre is the major form of professional wrestling in Mexico. But what many of you may not know is that it is taken very seriously in that country, to the point where there is a sort of a regulatory commission or board that governs masks because of how important they are to a person's character and to their identity in Mexico. And when when you lose your mask, you're not supposed to ever put it on again. And so when Ray got to WWE and was allowed to put his mask back on a technicality, because Ray didn't lose his mask in a mask versus mask match, which is how you're supposed to lose the mask. I forget the actual name of the match in Spanish, so forgive me.
Yeah.
But Ray had to literally move heaven and earth to be able to get the mask back. So for him to take it off for a bunch of trainees is a big deal. Is a big deal.
Yeah. And so we move on to episode 6, Learning to Adapt. And John and Jonah get to invite guests to the house, and Scott wants to invite an old high school flame, and that gets like so much ridicule.
Again, this is where the reality TV show aspect takes over, and you just want to bang your head.
Oh yeah.
It's like, I'm not here for this. I want to see the wrestling, not the petty bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
But it is what it is.
Yeah, and he does end up inviting her to the house, and she just up and says, "I don't think so." Like, just gets turned down.
I know what the presentation of the show is. It's supposed to make Scott look like he's trying to take advantage of the opportunity for his personal gain rather than professional gain.
Yeah,
but like I said, it's more reality TV nonsense that probably turned off a lot of wrestling fans to the show. Because there's a reason why Tough Enough went away, folks. It's because people stopped giving a damn.
Yeah. So Nick ends up suffering a bicep injury, can't extend his arm for about a week, and everybody craps all over him. Everybody. And this is like this is one thing that just annoys me about this episode personally. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I don't know. It didn't seem fair.
Unfortunately, a part of the business is a very selfish. There's a very selfish side to the business, and that's what and you're seeing it from these trainees. You're getting a really good picture of what professional wrestling is like, even from these people who aren't even in the business yet. And that picture is it's a me first. I'm going to get to the top if I have to crawl over your decomposing body to get there. Even if you're scratching and clawing me, I'm going to get there. And if you, for some reason, fall a step behind, I'm going to make a damn sure you fall down and get covered in mud so I can get to my destination. And that's what happened. Guy blew his bicep, and everyone was like, I see an opportunity to advance, and that's what happened. He got cut.
Yeah. And DDP ends up visiting, and he talks about, like, I wanted to be like the oldest rookie in wrestling history because I didn't start wrestling until I was 35. So DDP, one of those examples of how even like you're never too late. It's never too late to start wrestling. I think Batista was also one of those guys as well. He started late as well.
DDP is just one of those unique success stories. And then he's probably a good guy to bring in because he got to live his dream at an age when most people would tell you that that it's possible. He had guys believing in him, and to go and tell those kids his story probably gave them a little kick in the ass.
And so Nick is cut due to his injury, and I think and Nick even says like in the interview portion that I don't think I deserve to be eliminated. Like,
and he's probably right, but then again, it's that wrestler's mentality of I can work through it. Like we're seeing that very injury, Hiroshi Tanahashi is working with a bad bicep and has been to the point now where he probably doesn't even think about it. When he probably should have had surgery and not made the Dome show this past year, but he chugged right along. And I'm sure that's what Nick was thinking too. But like I said, when you're in that competitive environment, people are not going to wait for you. They're going to steamroll you and on to the next thing. And that's what happened. It is unfair. But that's just how it is.
Yep. And so we move on to episode 7. Jonah pulls a fast one, and Jonah ends up suffering a minor injury, but decides that it's a good idea to go ahead and rib everybody into thinking it's serious. And he gets like this neck brace, he has a bandage over his head. And I don't know. Personally, I thought it was a bit too mean-spirited.
If you've ever learned anything about ribs in professional wrestling, you'll learn that there is no line, and mean-spirited has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
Those people should be thankful they were not. It was just a fake neck brace and some bandages, and not Mr. Fuji paying a tow truck to rip your engine out of your car. And that's a true story. You thought that was a rip, folks, to take your engine out of your car. So, I think that's tame on the rib scale, but that's just me.
Yeah. So, and Scott ends up getting cut in this episode right before they go to Iceland.
Yeah. If you can't keep up, you got to move along.
Yeah, I honestly am surprised that he didn't get cut sooner, purely for his attitude.
People will put up with you up to your talent level. You see that in every sport, right?
Yeah.
Do you think if Kobe Bryant was half the shooter he was, Phil Jackson would have put up with him the way he did?
I don't think he would have. And I think the same goes for Shawn Michaels,
Well,
back
right.
in the late 90s.
Yeah. I mean, let's keep it to professional wrestling. Do you think Vince would have put up with half the shit that Sean did if Sean wasn't otherworldly in the ring? Answer
I
is
don't think he would have.
the answer is no. He would not have. You know, do you think? I mean, you people will put up with you for as long as you continue to contribute something to whatever it is you're doing. You know, just that's just how it is, and that's what happened with a guy like Scott. He probably should have been eliminated way before that, but he was able to keep himself around through his own hard work and maybe a little luck. And the luck ran out. It was finally, you rise to the level of your incompetence, as the saying goes. You found Scott's level of incompetence, you cut him, and you move along.
And so we move on to episode 8, A Trip to Iceland. And I believe that out of all the Tough Enough episodes for the season, this was the shortest episode of the season. On the network, it's only 17 minutes. So as a result, there's not too much to talk about. Some of the contestants put X-Lax and Jonas Smoothie, and the trainers take all the toilet paper away.
Welcome to professional wrestling.
Yeah. Honestly, I actually thought that was a funny rib. I thought that was funny.
I'm always happy for a good X-Lax rib. It makes me laugh on the inside because I am perpetually 6 years old.
Yeah, it's a classic prank, to say the least.
Mm-hmm.
And they all travel to Iceland, and there's a cut in Iceland. Kelly gets cut due to her back injury that she suffered a few episodes prior.
Just another professional wrestling story. Once your back starts to go, there's really not much you can do for it. Sean had to take time off for it. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We've seen it with Paige with her neck. Spinal injuries are just they can come up on you when you least expect it, and when they hit you, it's hard to keep going. It's not something. It's not fun to deal with, folks.
Yeah, so we move on to episode 9 on Foreign Ground. And honestly, this was probably my favorite episode of the season. I absolutely love this episode.
Well, tell us why you love it.
So they train in Iceland outside, and I just think it's a cool visual. The ring just being outside in Iceland. I just think it's a really cool visual.
One of the most beautiful places in the world. If you ever have a chance to go, I have not, but I've seen pictures. You just better bring a lot of jackets.
Yeah, it does look really cool.
I can't speak to this episode really because really nothing happened. Just more training, and they were getting out. You could tell by this late in the season, you could tell who the favorite is.
Yeah.
And you could tell people were keeping up, and you could see the final picture closing in.
Mm-hmm. And the ring ends up breaking, and everybody ends up putting the ring together. And I really like that. I really like that they showed that.
What, did Big Show trip and fall into it? No? Okay. Ring, get it, everyone? It's a ring break joke. I know. It was horrible. I apologize. um, I do like those kind of things when you're seeing what it takes to put that ring together. And it's a puzzle. And if one thing's off, you gotta take something apart, readjust it, retighten it, make sure it's the mat's laid down correctly, the frame. That's a puzzle.
Yeah, I mean, I think even one of the contestants says that it's wrestling 101.
Everybody who has ever tried to get into the business and has ever made it for any length of time knows what it means, knows what one of your first jobs is. And that's to be a part of the ring crew. And to put that ring together every night and take it apart every night. It's wrestling 101. That's right. It's everybody, almost everybody who's ever been in the business has had to put that ring together. You're not above it. Let me tell you that right now. If there's anybody who's thinking about becoming a professional wrestler listening to this tonight, let this be the one thing you take from this. You are not above putting that ring together.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's done it before you, and people will do it after you.
And so DeMott is annoyed after Jonah calls him old during an interview.
Okay, Bill. Okay. What are you going to do? Fight him? What?
Yeah,
Yes, Bill.
you can. Yeah, you can tell that he's annoyed during it, and I don't know. It's tough to say because on one hand, I can totally see why DeMott would get pissed off, but at the same time, though, when you see Jonah talk about it during that interview, you can tell it was a joke.
Yeah, it's like Bill Kidd. Those kind of guys always irk me who can't take the joke, who have to take themselves so seriously that they're above the humor. Bill, what was he? How old was he at this point? In his mid-30s?
I think so.
I mean, no, you're not old per se, Bill, but to a 22-year-old kid, yeah, you're old. Sorry. I didn't know that was breaking news. It's not, it may not be right, but it doesn't mean he's wrong. Whatever.
And so Al Snow ends up plotting to rib Jonah. And with the help of some of the other contestants, is able to sneak into his hotel room and leave a autographed photo of himself. And it's like an autograph saying, "You're mine, Al Snow." And I thought that was really funny.
That's a fun one. I like that.
Yeah, I love Al Snow.
Al Snow, who recently just bought OVW.
Indeed.
From Les Thatcher. So Al Snow will be once again training students down in Louisville, Kentucky, for those of you who are interested. Al Snow just bought the whole thing. Good luck, Al.
Yeah, so everybody goes on a Viking ship and tries to row it. And that was really cool.
Skull. Sorry, once again. I'm being dumb, ladies and gentlemen. I apologize. I'm sure they had great success. All right, Matt?
Yeah. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. Like everybody does not know how to row that ship.
It takes a lot of timing, a lot of patience, and you better be in tune with the person sitting next to you. And if you're not, you're just going to go in circles.
Yeah, and what I loved about it is that Al Snow is just directing them like a Viking.
Because he looks like a Viking a little bit.
Yeah.
Not
And
now.
so they all,
Not now. He doesn't look like that anymore.
yeah, yeah. And so everybody goes to a Viking restaurant, and everybody eats shark meat at a restaurant. Have you ever had shark meat before, Adam?
Have I ever had shark meat? No.
Neither have I. And I don't know if I ever want to be honest.
Hey, yeah, you deep fry anything. I'll take a swing at it.
Like one of the contestants says that tastes like a bicycle tire.
I bet.
Maybe.
I bet, but guess what, folks? You deep fry a bicycle tire, I still might take a swing at it. Just remember, kids, bacon grease makes everything better.
It very well could. And so Jonah ends up hiding the shark meat. He doesn't eat it, but everybody still smells it. And so Jonah feels the need to strip completely naked to prove he's not hiding it. And he does this in full view of all the contestants and of all the employees at the restaurant as well. Reality TV, baby.
When you get innocent civilians in on the rib, it just makes it a little better. It really does.
Yeah.
I love it.
And so John and Jonah end up putting on a match for a lot of local kids in Iceland, and it's really their first real like this is what it's like to put on a match in front of a crowd.
So this is their first match in front of an audience.
Yeah.
That is where the best learning is done. In a ring, in front of people who aren't your family, who have paid money to come cheer you on because they love you. It's in front of a crowd of 50, 100, 1,000 strangers reacting to you. There will never be any better training than that, because that's where you learn how to make someone react. And if you can't make someone react, you've lost the ability to be in this business. It's a part of the reason why I wish NXT would go on the road more and get out of Full Sail. That audience is conditioned to act a certain way, and those wrestlers are conditioned to act a way to get that crowd to react. If you took NXT, those Full Sail tapings, and just went 150 miles or whatever it is from Orlando, from Full Sail to Tampa, you'd get a completely different reaction. Or if you went across the state to Jacksonville. It's those little things that you have to do to help to give young wrestlers the ability to learn how to make audiences react, because not every audience is the same. An audience in England is going to be different than an audience in San Jose, California. Is going to be different than an audience in Toronto. Is going to be different than an audience in Dallas, Texas. Because people are different. So that right there, them wrestling in front of that audience in Iceland, did more for them, I guarantee you, than almost any piece of the training leading up to it.
Mm-hmm. And so we move on to episode 10, Reaching New Heights. And we get quite possibly one of the biggest ribs in the season where Al Snow and Bill DeMott cover the entire house and all the contestants in shaving cream.
I love that's such a 10-year-old boy thing to do
Yeah.
that I enjoy it immensely.
Yeah, it was fun. And what I loved the most about that rib was Jonah's reaction to it after it happened. He's like, I'll get you, Al Snow, if it's the last thing I do. Which should be a catchphrase for anybody that gets beat by Al Snow. Whenever Al Snow beats someone in a match, in a wrestling match, whether it's WWE or any other promotion, the person that just got beat needs to say, I'll get you, Al Snow, if it's the last thing I do.
Like I said, I just love silly shit like that. Because it's fun. It keeps everything light.
So everybody works on jumping off a high distance, and the stunt coordinators pull the plug on the experiment after Jonah screws it up because he doesn't watch his form when he's falling, and he ends up landing like about on his feet, which is like the worst thing you can do in that scenario.
How high were they jumping from?
I don't know. It was pretty high.
Was it like turnbuckle to mat height?
No, it was higher than that.
So it was like a very high jump to get them
very high jump
to get them to get their body right?
Yeah.
Some people you see this. So with some people you see this with Charlotte. She hits that moonsault, and what's her natural reaction to do? Land on her feet.
Yeah.
She lands on her feet every time. And one of these times, she's going to twist her ankle.
Mm-hmm.
You got to know how. I know it sounds weird, but to be such an athlete, you almost have to learn how to control your body in flight.
Yeah.
It's weird, and I know that sounds odd, but that's what they're asking them to do.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. You know.
Yeah, it's what makes Ricochet and all the shit he does so amazing. Because he's getting those rotations and the speed and the ability, but he's landing correctly. I mean, he's not over rotating too much or not rotating enough. So when you see someone jump from those heights and then land on your feet, you're asking for it.
Yep. So everybody goes to an improv and just kind of work on our promos. And what's interesting is that John, calls himself Johnny Blaze, which will be like his first real ring name because he came up to the main roster as Eric Bischoff's apprentice, and he was using that name at first before changing his name to Johnny Nitro.
Well, Blaze and Nitro are almost related, so it's a little bit of foreshadowing.
Yeah, Matt Capitelli also calls himself the Flavor and says like people are going to taste the aftertaste, which was his super kick finishing move down in OVW.
That is absolutely disgusting. that is not attractive. I do not want to taste the aftertaste, Matt Capitelli. I really do not. Please refrain from making me do that. That is odd.
And so the episode ends with Jonah kind of starting to doubt himself a little bit.
Yeah, like I said, it's at this point where you're starting to see who has it and who doesn't. Who are the favorites and who aren't. And if you see it on TV, you can guarantee it. Those guys are feeling it as they're in it.
And so we move on to episode number 11, Who's Coming to Dinner? And the mystery guest that's coming for dinner is Trish Stratus.
I have to make sure I'm a good person and not say some shit I said. But let me be frank. Early 2000s Trish Stratus was one of the most gorgeous women walking God's green earth. And it wasn't fair, ladies and gentlemen. It just wasn't. when you think diva, it's that early 2000s Trish Stratus who was just learning how to really work. But she would get better in the ring later on here. But this just, I like I said, I need to be a good person today, so I'm not going to say things. But I can't imagine what it would have been like for those guys at that time to sit down at that table with her and not. I'm sitting here and my mind is running blank because she had that on-screen presence. She was that blonde bombshell. It's such a corny term, but it is what that's what she was. And I'm drooling over myself. I'm like literally fumbling over my words. I can't. I'm 14 years old all over again. I know that's not right, but I don't care. It is what it is. And I think when you look at it, that would be the perfect person for them to sit down and learn from at that time.
Yeah.
Because she was just starting to really figure it out. Like, I can be more than just this pinup. I could be more than just the really super hot chick in the really tiny bikini. I can be a wrestler. And she figured it out. So I'm certain that her being there it would be a nice way of reassuring them that, hey, even if you don't get it immediately, that doesn't mean you never will.
Right.
And I think that's what Trish offered in that moment, outside of course, ratings. But once again, I'm a good person. I'm going to shut my mouth.
And so John Gruberwick wants Jonah out after their conversation, after he starts down himself. So
now, what episode was this? Was this 11 or 12?
11.
So was Jonah cut or was it Justin cut?
Justin gets cut in this episode.
Okay, but Gruberwick wanted Jonah out because Jonah started to have those doubts.
Yeah.
Well, that's John Gruberwick for you, ladies and gentlemen.
and yet,
by the way, just as a quick aside, he's back with the company.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, apparently, he is back working with the company in terms of Greatest Royal Rumble. So it'll be interesting to see him being back after all these years.
They all come back. No matter who they did or what they did or the shit they said on the way out, they all come back.
Yep.
Because Vince McMahon is a benevolent emperor. I'm going to get shit for that. I know I
am. So Bradshaw comes on the show and gets drunk with everybody.
Oh, good. That's just what everybody needs, a drunk Bradshaw.
But I mean, this was Bradshaw back when he was tolerable. Back when he was APA Bradshaw. Well, not even APA. He was still at this time, but he was still basically APA Bradshaw.
Long black hair.
Yeah.
But Bradshaw's always been a dick.
Yeah.
That part
I
of
mean,
him is never turned off. So they're lucky he was wanting to drink with them and not beat the shit out of him, because that was probably the next thing he wanted to do.
yeah.
That's the kind of guy Bradshaw is. If he doesn't, if he thinks he's above you, he's going to put the boots to you because he knows he can get away with it. But I'm not going to go off on a tangent.
And so the episode ends with everybody trying the moonsault, and it was really cool to see that.
That move, I tell you now, it's one thing to do a backflip into a pool. It's another thing to do a backflip onto a hard surface.
Yeah.
And you not land on, and you have to fight the urge to land on your feet. I think people were so desensitized to some of these basic wrestling, I would say, like basic wrestling moves. But if people really stop to think about the moonsault, that's some scary shit.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because you have to, it's the backflip and your vision constantly changing, your line of vision. And then you have to hope that person, if they're not, rolling out from you underneath from you as part of the spot. But it's that, and then you have to be able to land correctly so you don't hurt yourself, but so you don't hurt the other person. It's just, and yet we see people doing 450 splashes and standing shooting star presses, and I'm just like, holy shit, guys, stop. I mean, you almost lose sight of some of that just basic stuff and how dangerous it really is.
And so we move on to episode 12, probably the most infamous episode in this season, Hard Knocks. And this is the episode where contestants and trainers from the first two seasons of Tough Enough to Come Back, I believe Maven, Nydia, Jacqueline, Hardcore Holly, Linda Miles, and Chava Guerrero all come down to visit.
Maven.
Yeah.
Maven. His man, I remember him breaking in. And one of the first things they did was feed him to the Undertaker, wasn't it?
Yeah, at the Royal Rumble.
Thanks for playing, kid. He was fun, but then you bring up Nydia. Man, I remember Nydia. She's one of the few from all those seasons of Tough Enough that made an impression on me, because she was different, had a different look. And then they paired her up with, by God, Jamie Noble. And I remember that just being so good. How they were trailer as hell, and it was trashy, but it was good. And of course, I had made a connection with Jamie Noble prior, because I saw Jamie Noble when he was in developmental.
Oh, really?
My parents are separated. When I was a kid, when I would go down to my dad's, and he lived in the Dayton, Ohio area. And for those who aren't aware, the WWE had a developmental school in that television area down in Cincinnati, known as HWA, Heartland Wrestling Association. It was run by Les Thatcher. And that's where WWE would send some of the developmental people. And they had two developmental schools. The more famous one was OVW out of Louisville, Kentucky. And the other one was HWA out of Cincinnati. And we would get HWA programming like at 11 o'clock or midnight on the weekends. So I would stay up late just to watch developmental TV. And I got to see Jamie Noble. I got to see very early Irish Airborne, better known now as Ohio. The Christ brothers. I'm sorry, guys. Sammy Callahan's posse. And so one of the very first guys I remember seeing is Jamie Noble. And he was just this mean, vicious little guy who was just this redneck. And I remember the night he was brought up to SmackDown, and they paired him with Nydia. And I thought they made a great little pair in the Cruiserweight division. So I remember Nydia. But like you said, this is the very famous episode because once again, Bob Holly just can't not act like an asshole. I don't get what Bob's problem is, but I guess because he thinks he's old school. But tell the people what happened, Matt.
Yeah, so there's like this big tag match, and Hardcore Holly, for whatever reason, just stiffs Matt Capitelli, just beats him as hard as he possibly can, kicks him as hard as he can, and he's not wearing like traditional wrestling boots. He's wearing tennis shoes. So I'm sure that hurts just as much, if not even worse. Like, I don't know. I don't know.
Did he ever give an explanation?
They actually did interview him on the show, and he says, "I'm being stiff for these kids, not because I want to be, not because I can be. I'm trying to show them that wrestling, it's a rough world." And I'm like, that is such BS.
Bob Holly, first of all, Bob Holly, you never drew a dime in this business. So stop acting like you're some sort of protector. You're not. And I know you could probably come here and kick my ass, and you probably could. But let's be straight here. The days of people needing to protect this business are over, for better or for worse. You don't need to stiff somebody to show them that this business is rough. The bumps they're taking, tell them that, dumbass. You don't. That is such an outdated way of thinking now. It was outdated then. But this idea that you need to stiff somebody because they need to learn is hysterical. It's so out of place. We don't need guys like Hiro Matsuda anymore breaking your leg for you to learn, for you to earn it in this business. Those days are past. So for him to go on there on national television and put hands on somebody because he thinks it's his job is laughable. And he still acts like a hard ass to this day. Like he is a hard ass for some reason. No, you're not. You're a middle-aged nobody who didn't draw a dime, who was lucky to be allowed in the business for as long as he was. Shut up. It goes to show you the mentality of some of these old school guys that are better left in the past.
Yeah, I did not get why Hardcore Holly was taking liberties with Matt Capitelli. It made no sense at all.
Well, it's that I need to protect the business. From what?
Yeah.
I mean, who are you protecting the business from? Like there isn't a wrestling school on every major city in the country. You want to go to every major wrestling school, Bob Holly, and stiff kids? No. So why are you doing it here? He probably should have been fired for it, honestly, but I know he wasn't.
Yeah.
I know Vince likes that shit, but
And so like Matt Capitelli is just all messed up like after this. Like when you see him, doing interviews, during the episode, you see him with a black eye. Like he's bleeding from the mouth. Like he's really affected by this incident. Like he really is. Like he just kind of shuts himself off from everybody.
Well, how else is someone supposed to react when one of your trainers comes in, there's somebody who you respect enough to not only train you, but teach you this sport, who you've given your body to so you can learn. And the first thing he does is to betray that trust and beat the hell out of you for real? I mean, that doesn't register. The days of gatekeepers are gone. I mean, there you hear the old story. I heard this story down in the Florida territory. Guys would come in and say, "Hey, I think I can wrestle. I want to be a wrestler." So you know what they would have them do? They'd have him get in a ring with Bob Backlund and tell him, if you can beat Bob, we'll train you. You're not beating Bob Backlund, folks, in the wrestling match, in the amateur wrestling match. You're not doing it. I don't care how big you are, you ain't doing it. But that's what they would do. They would stretch you and beat you and break your limbs to keep you out, because they didn't want people coming in. They wanted that money for themselves. They wanted those spots for themselves. They didn't want newcomers. So that's why they would do that. That's why you had those gatekeepers. But in an era, especially in the early 2000s, when the secret's out, you're the only game in town, and there's a wrestling training facility on every, like I said, in every major city in the country. Bob Holly taking on this mantle of Lord Protector of the business is stupid and out of touch. You could go on forever on this topic because it really is infuriating that something like that happened on WWE's watch. And it goes into the next year. Because what happens in the next year's the year after this is Royal Rumble. What happens? If anybody remembers.
Yeah, I think Daniel Puder got in there and got stiffed by everybody. Like
Daniel Puder.
I don't know who was in that match at the time.
It was the Royal Rumble, and number 1 and number 2, and I forget which order, were Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero. Puder was 3. Bob Holly was 4. Those 3 took turns with this kid. If anybody's ever seen it, go watch it on YouTube. You can tell that Eddie, Benoit, and Bob Holly, being all very old school guys, decided they were going to teach this kid a lesson at the Royal Rumble, and they beat the shit out of him. And it makes you laugh only because, not because it's funny, but because it's so cringeworthy that you don't know how to react. Because they're just chopping the shit out of him. And just bang. And then Benoit would take a turn. Bang. And then when Bob came in, Bob laid into him. Bang. And then they finally toss him over the rope. And it's like, and I think that's what ended up running Puder out of the business, isn't it?
It might have been because I don't think he was around for much longer after that.
I know he did some small time stuff after WWE, but they made sure to drum him out of the business. Was he disrespectful? Yes, but like I said, the age of gatekeepers were over. You don't need that. I know some old school fans be like, "Yes, you do. Look at all the pantywigs and these pencil neck geeks in the business now." To borrow a phrase from Freddie Blassie, and I'd be like, "So what? So what? A guy who's 5'9", 175 pounds is in the wrestling business. He made it. Did you? No, you sat on your ass on your couch." And decided just to be a critic for no other reason than to be a critic. It's just one of those. It irritates me, as you can tell. It just irritates me that there's still that mentality out there.
Yeah, so we move on to episode 13, Nature of the Business. Taz comes over and plays SmackDown Just Bring It with Jonah. And I do have to question the choice of game because Just Bring It was one of the worst WWE games ever, but maybe that's just me.
Where did Just Bring It fall on the spectrum? Was that the first? Was that before SmackDown versus Raw?
Yeah, it was before SmackDown vs. Raw. Just Bring It came out in 2001, and SmackDown vs. Raw series started in 2004.
Okay, so what am I missing? It's Just Bring It. Is it SmackDown Know Your Role?
Know Your Role was in 2000. It's SmackDown and SmackDown 2 Know Your Role in 2000. Then Just Bring It 2001. Then SmackDown Shut Your Mouth in 2002. Then SmackDown Here Comes the Pain in 2003. And then SmackDown vs. Raw in 2004 up until 2011 where they replaced it with W12. Then around 2013, I believe, they started the whole 2K thing.
WWE SmackDown Shut Your Mouth is one of the best professional wrestling video games of all time.
Absolutely.
It is so good.
Yeah, and I'm going to be talking about it on the podcast in a couple of weeks.
That game was so good. Oh, I remember all the hours in it. And all of it. It wasn't even the best graphically or it wasn't the most natural game either. It didn't have some of it was clunky, but God, that game was so good. So good.
Yeah, it was a really fun game. I thought it was a huge step up from Just Bring It personally.
Yeah, Just Bring It wasn't great. I just remember. Oh God, I'm getting all nostalgic now. Oh, it is. That game. Thinking about that game right now was like a warm blanket. Oh, you just all the characters and like the story was iffy, but you didn't care. It was great.
Yeah. So
yeah,
go on.
Yeah, but no, yeah, you're right. Those early games before Shut Your Mouth were not the best fare. But like you said, Taz came in to play video games because he was feeling charitable.
Yeah. Yeah, like the idea was that he was going to be a guest coach for them. Like he was going to take them to the canyons at 6 a.m. But it turns out that it was all just a ruse and that they are going to SmackDown.
Yeah, I remember this. I remember that they all loaded him up, take him to SmackDown, and the oohs and the ahs.
Yeah.
This is what a WWE production looks like. And it is a traveling circus. Yeah, it's a production to behold, no doubt.
Yeah, it looks really, really cool. And so they end up talking with Vince McMahon himself.
Uh, whose kids are these? Why are they here in front of me? Vince did the tough enough kids. Oh, okay. With a
You're the
coffee
tough enough kids, pal.
okay. I'm sure he was a warm and cuddly figure.
Yeah, he did come across some pretty nice on this episode.
He hadn't started going gray yet at this point.
No, I don't think it. I think there was a few, but I think at the time it was sort of like this kind of mix between gray and black.
I know it's supposed to be that big moment of meeting Vince,
Yeah.
but then you also have to realize Vince is Vince, and you're like, oh, okay, this is. They're meeting the guy who will one day fire them. That's awesome. And then he'll be subtle about it either.
Yeah. You're fired.
Thanks, Vince. Here's a breath mint. Get out of my face.
And so we move on to episode 14, the season finale of Tough Enough 3, Endings and Beginnings. And this was mainly a recap show. Like nothing much happened on here. It was just the winners are announced and that's it.
Were they still doing the finale at WWF New York?
Yeah. This was from the world, and I think this was one of the final big events that happened there.
You're right, because by the time the next time the Tough Enough roll around, I think the restaurant had gone away, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think it ended up closing not too long after the season finale of this show.
That is just quirky enough a trivia question that I am going to look it up. Because I must know. Sorry, kids. Live TV. The World restaurant, WWF New York, closed in 2003.
Yeah, I believe the season finale was in late January of 2003, so they're kind of pretty close here.
Yep. It's yeah. This is one. This is one of the last. I remember nearly every major thing that they ever wanted to pimp. Something happened at that restaurant. That was such a part of the television product.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, WWF New York. I will never forget it. It is such early Ruthless Aggression era, late Attitude era. It's just one of those places. Nothing happened there. It was just a restaurant. It was a glorified Hard Rock, which is what it actually became later. That Hard Rock, there's a Hard Rock there now, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But it was such a part of the presentation that I'll never forget that place. I never even went there. I'll just never forget that in that space.
Yeah, it was a big part of the WWE experience.
Yeah, it was just a part of the product. I remember they had an interview there. Remember when Spike and Taz were a tag team?
I think so. I think so. Actually, I think that happened like early 2002. I think.
I remember they had that quick little tag run together, and they did an interview from the restaurant, sitting on stage on a sofa. That's weird shit like that. I'll never forget. But yeah, this is one of the last times a major event happened at WWF New York. And it was, like you said, it was a recap show, showed you everything that happened. And drumroll, please, your winners of Tough Enough 3 are
Matt Capitelli and John Hennigan. Both of them win the competition, and both at the time and in hindsight, do you think that these two were the right choices to win?
I think in hindsight, they were, because I'm gonna, and I know this is a sort of a shitty way of looking at it, but it's true. Did any of the other runner-ups do anything in the business?
I don't think they did.
Matt Capitelli and John Hennigan were the only ones who went on to continue in the business. As for everyone knows, John Hennigan would go on to become Johnny Nitro, and a 3-time Intercontinental Champion, and won a World Tag and WWE Tag title. He was also ECW Champion, as well as many other independent titles since then. And Matt Capitelli, unfortunately, was in developmental, and in the year 2005, he had to retire due to a brain tumor. And the tumor was removed in 2007, but Matt Capitelli has not returned to the ring since. And it was back in 2017. He had a grade diagnosed with a grade 4 glioblastoma, which is a very aggressive. It's the most aggressive cancer that starts in the brain. I do not know what the current status of Matt Capitelli is, his health. He did win the OVW Heavyweight Championship, but like I said, his career never took off because his health just took over. I do know. Go ahead, Matt.
You can go ahead.
I do know that as of late last 2 years ago, late last year, I'm sorry, December 2017, the doctors said his cancer was terminal. He had 5 years to live. And he's only 38 years old. We'll never know what Matt Capitelli could have been in the business when you compare it to John Hennigan, Johnny Nitro. But it's just one of those sad stories of life comes at you quick. We wish Mr. Capitelli the best. I hope that the terminal diagnosis can be treated, and maybe one day post off, maybe one day we find a cure, but if not, it's just a tragic story of a guy who had a lot of promise, but life got in the way.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that John Morrison, probably the most successful Tough Enough winner that there ever was.
Yeah, it says Tough Enough 3 gave us the most successful winner ever. It gave us the most successful female to ever participate, as I said earlier in the broadcast. Melina Perez uh, became the most decorated female to ever participate in the uh, competition. Although the thing with Melina is, and I'll keep it brief, is that she also got herself a reputation in the business. She got attached to Johnny Nitro, and there was a lot of talk of her having a lot of heat backstage. And I do know now. I think she's married now, isn't she?
I'm not. I don't know. She might be.
Um, she, but she did make a mark. There's no doubt. I don't think you can tell the story of the early Ruthless Aggression era without Melina's part. Because she was different. She had that entrance. I don't need to describe the entrance. If you've seen it, you remember it. Especially if she was wearing her trademark skirt. I'm just saying. It is what it was. She was doing the splits on the apron for a reason, okay, folks? Like I said, she was the most decorated woman to ever come out of the competition, and she auditioned in this season. She wasn't bad in the ring. I think Melina could hang today.
I don't know. It's possible. I don't know. For me, I was never really a fan of Melina.
I mean, there is that. She has that, and that. I don't know how else to say that quality to her that is unlikable. Um, I mean, I remember when she. Do you remember that one? I mean, it's one of her most infamous moments in the company when she tried to get Batista to call off of the match, and uh, there was supposed to be a tag match between Eminem, who had the belts, and they were going to wrestle Rey Mysterio and Dave Batista, who at that time Batista was also world champ. And Melina went to Batista's locker room. And remember, you have to remember, folks, this was the Ruthless Aggression era. They were doing a lot of really risque shit. And Melina tried to get Dave to call off the match by, quote unquote, engaging in sexual intercourse, unquote. The screen goes to black, it cuts to commercial. And the next time you see them is Melina. The next thing you see is Melina, her bra, and her putting her shirt back on. And her asking Batista if they have a deal. And Batista says to her, "Hey, thanks for the warm-up." The next week, they have a fake press conference where they say Melina says that Batista sexually harassed her. I don't know why I'm laughing. I just remember this being so ludicrous. I'm like, why are we doing this? Like, if they tried to do that today, could you imagine?
No, I don't think they would be able to get away with something like that today.
She had like I said, she had a bit of a reputation backstage. Her and John Hennigan kind of would. They were together forever. I mean, I remember it wasn't. It was just. I feel it was recently they stopped seeing each other, but
yeah,
that's neither here nor there. I just remember Melina. She was athletic enough to bump, to go out there and bump, have a match, and she was charisma. She was such a great heel. She made it easy to boo, especially when she was working with a couple guys like Mercury and Nitro, who didn't really have that. You could tell they were aloof. You know what I mean? Like they didn't. You booed Mercury and Nitro, not because they acted like really like Hollywood. Part of it was the Hollywood. They had that Miz gimmick.
Yeah.
That Hollywood, I'm better than you thing. But it was amplified because they had this little Latina girl who just pissed you off because she was just so catty and annoying, and it worked. It helped that they were in a real relationship too, but as a package, they were great. And I think it was because of that run with Eminem. Simply put, that Eminem run helped make this Tough Enough season really worth it when you look at it.
Yeah. I think as far as Matt Capitelli goes, he had a lot of potential. And cancer is an awful disease because I think if it wasn't for cancer, he honestly would have been a top star in WWE. I honestly think he would have been a top star.
He had potential. He had a boatload of potential. They put that OVW strap on him for a reason. They thought highly of him. But once again, it's first of all, fuck cancer again. Fuck cancer with a rusty kitchen knife. It's one of, we shouldn't still be having to talk about people dying from cancer in this day and age. We simply shouldn't. But it's who knows what it could have been. We could be talking about a guy who, had a 10, 15. Like I said, he retired 10 years ago. Who knows what he could have been? Let's see. The show was in 2003. He was diagnosed in 2005. And he was out of the business by 2007. I mean, how it can't get more heartbreaking than that. For someone who was just, he was just getting in. I mean, when you think about it, he's 38 years old now. By the time he retired, he was 28, roughly. He was diagnosed at 26, which means he was on the show in his early 20s. This guy didn't have a shot because life just happened.
Yeah, and just hopefully he's able to get the treatment that he needs to get rid of this horrible disease known as cancer.
Yeah, it's like I said earlier. Doctors said the cancer is terminal, so I hope he's getting the kind of treatment he needs to. Um, we all want to see him beat it, obviously, but if just short of that, he's able to live his life comfortably, and I'm just unfortunate. You never know how that you know you never know how life is going to go. You see a guy with so much potential, and then life gets in the way.
Yeah, so that's gonna be the end of Tough Enough 3. It's gonna be the end of this episode. Overall, what did you think of this season, Adam?
I rem- I'm sorry. I remember this season being about the time I tuned out. I remember watching the Tough Enough 2 finale when they announced the two girls won. And I remember thinking about, well, this being the year they announced that two guys won. And it started to feel like there was a formula. And it kind of got disinterested. Um, it still doesn't take away the fact that this of any Tough Enough, this is the one that succeeded in its goal. Finding someone who could be that next superstar. And it did. It found Johnny Nitro. And it found Melina. This is the series that the installation of the series that did its job the best. Um, we'll see what happens now that we have a couple new, more recent Tough Enough competitors on the roster. See what happens with Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville. See what if they can make their claim at maybe turning their season into something that matters. But to me, the lasting impression of Tough Enough 3 is this is the year they got it right.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was a solid season. Like I said in the beginning, I wasn't really sure what to expect from this episode, but overall, I thought it was an enjoyable enough season. It's not something I'm going to go back and rewatch, but I think for the most part, I think it was a decent enough watch.
Did let me ask you, since you went back and watched it, does your viewing of Tough Enough 3 make you want to go back and look at the previous seasons or any of the other seasons?
Um, uh, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't interested because I am sort of interested, but at the same time, it's not something that I really want to do. I think because by the end of this season, it was kind of getting a bit repetitive because it was like training, then they would go out and it's pretty much it was basically that someone gets cut, it was starting to get kind of repetitive by the end. I thought.
Yeah. Did if you had to maybe like grade it, how much of just the percentage? How much of the percentage of it do you feel was reality TV, and how much of it do you think was actual uh, wrestling or that the content that you were looking for?
I would say the majority of it was probably legit. I think maybe some of what happened at the house and what happened when they went out was maybe scripted. So I would say maybe 75% maybe was of it was legit.
Okay, if let me play a little devil's advocate with you here, or just a little game here. If WWE came to you, Matt, and said, "We want you to produce Tough Enough," based on what you saw from just this season, what changes would you make to Tough Enough? to maybe make it something that more people would watch?
Um, I don't know if I'd really change anything about the format, more or less. I think they did things pretty well in this particular season for the most part. I wouldn't have Hardcore Holly stiffing a guy or anything like that, but I think other than that, I think it would mainly stay the same. I don't think I would really change all that much about it.
Do you think Tough Enough is something they should keep doing, or something they should leave in the past?
I think it's something that they should just kind of leave in the past. It was just something that they tried. It didn't really work, and I don't think a lot of good has really come out of it in terms of winners because yeah, because for every John Morrison, there's also
A
um
Jackie Gata.
yeah the guy that Josh and Andy, Silent Rage, all
Oh
that.
God, yeah. Oh my God, yeah. They just made my eyes roll so hard they're in the back of my head. Oh yeah, Andy. Oh, um. I guess my only question is: do you think maybe seeing things like the Mae Young Classic are replacing things like Tough Enough, or do you think, although these specialized tournaments, or do you think that Tough Enough is something that can stand up on its own in this era of the WWE Network, the tournaments, the indie talent that is out there that WWE has been picking from?
I think the tournaments work a little bit better, because Tough Enough it was kind of a gimmicky kind of show. Yeah, it did kind of show that like anybody can become a WWE superstar.
Well, my thing with Tough Enough is it kind of shows you that anybody can become a wrestler, but not everyone can make it in the WWE. I mean,
Right.
the thing that exposed Tough Enough wasn't even tough enough. It was something like, do you remember when CMT ran Hulk Hogan's Celebrity Championship, Celebrity Wrestling?
I do remember that. I do remember that.
The thing that always struck me about that was by the end of that show, were those people with that minimum training basically having a wrestling match?
It's been so long since I saw that.
I go back and look at it, see if you can find that final. But by the end of that series, what you saw were these middle-aged celebrities were still able to go out and put on a match. I'm not saying it was a good match, or even a path, or even a quality match, or even something I would recommend you watching. But it was a wrestling match. You could tell it was a wrestling match. I think when you see that and you see something like Tough Enough, it shows that it kind of takes away some of the specialness in the business. And maybe that's me. But there is that element of, wow, that middle aged school teacher, Maven Huffman, was able to become a wrestler. Well, if he can do it, I can do it. But the difference is there's a big difference between being a professional wrestler and being a WWE superstar. And I think that is what Tough Enough showed. Almost anybody, and I hate to say anybody, but there's a lot of people out there with the ability to learn how to be a wrestler. It's just that extra step to the WWE that makes something like Tough Enough interesting.
Yeah, and so I think final thoughts on it. Yeah, it was an okay show. I don't know if I'd bring it back, But I thought it was a decent show for the time that it was around.
WWE was just trying to get on the reality TV train, and they found something that stuck. I don't think if Tough Enough, if you erased Tough Enough from the history books, and then tried to start Tough Enough up again today, I don't think it would have the cachet or I don't think people would want to watch it. You know what I mean? That style of TV has kind of become passe.
Yeah. So I think that's it for this episode. Are there any plugs you want to plug before we get out of here?
As always, if you people want to talk to me, and I don't know why you would, but if you so choose, you can find me on Twitter at PWFan01. Giant Ohio State logo on my Twitter page. Hit that follow button if you want to talk about anything. I'm here and open and willing to talk to anybody. And also, I'm over at Cage Side Seats under my full name. But if I just find the guy named Adam, that's me.
And you can also follow me on Twitter at MetalMatt15. I'm still in the process of creating the Twitter page for the podcast, so hopefully that'll be coming sooner rather than later. You can also catch me on Cage Side Seats. I'm in the daily and the nightly. In fact, I'm actually writing the nightly intro right now, actually, so it'll be posted in just a couple of minutes.
Those poor people are waiting, man.
But yeah, so next week's episode is going to be on No Mercy 2002. Ooh. So we get to relive the Katie Vick angle.
Oh God, damn it! Oh, why?
I have to, Adam. It's part of the podcast.
No, the hell do you do? You can skip that. You can skip that, and we will be all the better off for it. WWE wishes you would skip it. Oh, God, how is he going to explain that to his children?
I don't know.
Daddy, why are you on screen fucking a fake corpse? Oh, God, I hate... Oh. Okay, y'all have fun with that. I'm going to go wash my eyes out with bleach. Oh, why?
Yeah, but One Winged Angel is going to be joining me for that episode, so it should be an interesting watch, to say the least.
Dude, I have to ask, is the Katie Vick angle on the network?
Yeah, it is. It is.
That is so funny. It makes me want to cry. You think of anything they'd want to erase, it'd be that.
I mean, that episode where it does take place, it is rated TV mature, so
that thing should have been rated TV. Shoot it into the sun. You have fun with that.
All right, so is there anything else you want to plug before we get out of here?
For those who are listening, don't forget tomorrow, our friends over at Shooting the Breeze will be having their weekly episode. Starts at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, I believe, and 10 a.m. Central. So if you are so inclined, please give them a listen. And I don't have any other plugs if you don't. So you want to wrap this one up?
Yeah, I think that's about it. So thank you all for listening to this episode of the Ruthless Aggression Era podcast. And I'll see you next Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern for No Mercy 2002. It's going to be a wild ride.
The Katie Vick special. Enjoy.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Good night, everybody.